All right, we're live. Welcome to Dive into World Building. And this week we have our guest, Andrea Stewart. Hey, Andrea, thank you for coming to visit us.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm glad that it worked out this time.
Yeah, so Andrea's a very interesting writer whom I met at local conventions, which is kind of unusual for the people who are on the show, because most of the people on the show are from all over the place. And so I went digging a little bit, and I think that your biggest product line at this point is the Changeling Wars series. Am I right?
That's correct, yeah.
Cool. I also read a story that you had at Beneath Ceaseless Skies, which was pretty cool. So.
Oh yeah, I like that one. I like that publication a lot.
But we can. If you really like it, tell us about it.
Oh, the one at Beneath Ceaseless Skies?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's kind of like I set it in a pseudo-Chinese culture, and I kind of started with this image in my head of an opium den with this magical smoke, and where the land around the city was basically dying, and this was an escape for people. So I kind of just ran with that idea from there, and what kind of people would live there, and what kind of problems they would have.
That's very cool. Was this something where are you influenced often by Chinese culture, or was this a deliberate choice for you? In what way?
I think sometimes it really depends on what I'm writing. I mean, I do write some things set with characters who are Chinese or have some of that culture going on, just because that is partially what I grew up with. My mom's Chinese, and she immigrated over from China, and so half my family's Chinese. And the way that they interact with each other is very different from the way that my dad's side of the family interacts with each other. So I kind of draw a little bit from that.
Yeah, and things like the interaction style are so hard to capture if you haven't experienced them. If you haven't been a part of it, it's very hard to capture the insider's interaction style. So I think it's really interesting that you've got that going on. Cool. Yeah, no, it's a really neat story. So I encourage you guys all to go and check it out. When did that come out? I'm blanking.
Oh shoot, that came out that was a while ago. It was like a year ago, I think.
Not super new, but anyway, still worth.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of stuff that's like. Yeah, I don't have a lot of things that are online for free right now. I think a lot of it kind of fell off. Like, I had some stuff at IGMS, and then Galaxy's Edge. So those things, they kind of just fall off the free internet thing.
Yeah, sure. So cool, awesome, great. Well, so let's get into something bigger and a little meatier then. So tell us about the Changeling Wars series and how that concept sort of took root and grew in your head.
Well, honestly, it started as a writing exercise that I did with my writing group. We had everybody chose a word, basically, and then you had to try to write something using all of those words. And I generally write very kind of dark, lush, dark fantasy kind of stuff, and I'd wanted to write something a little bit lighter, a little bit more fun. So I took those words and I came up with this scene where this woman walks in on her husband cheating on her, and because of that, the high emotions, it actually triggers her magical powers, and she discovers that she's not only adopted, but she's also a changeling. So it's this, very high emotion kind of everything's changed for her. And I kind of just ran with it from there and decided to make it into an entire book. Which was what was funny was that when I came into my writing group when we were, sharing our stuff as far as like what we had come up with, I think I was the only one that actually went through with the exercise. So that was kind of fun.
It just goes to show that when somebody gives you an exercise, you really have to do the exercise because you never know what might happen.
Right, like what might kind of come out of it, which is, yeah, I mean, I do like writing exercises and stuff a lot just because I find that it can really spark some ideas that you might not have otherwise come up with.
Yeah. I'm writing notes over here. You know that, right? Because I'm gonna have this written up hopefully by Friday. And that way everybody who doesn't get to come in here and chat with us and be awesome can actually come in here and look at my blog and say, oh, look, it's Andrea Stewart's Hangout. Now we can see what we talked about. That's the whole idea. Not everybody has time to come and watch an hour of video. So skimming words on a page is sometimes easier for some people. So that's awesome. It's kind of cool to see you giving 3 cheers for writing exercises.
Yes. I love them.
Well, what's funny is that for some authors, they can be really, really terrific because, I mean, if you remember, If You Were a Dinosaur, My Love by Rachel Swirsky, that was also a writing exercise. So, like,
that was amazing. I loved that story.
It was an amazing story, but it was like, but you could see how it was like a train of thought thing, right? Those conditions were definitely something where you could induce them using writing exercise. You see my point? So.
Yeah. I mean, it was Flash, which still boggles my mind.
Yeah. I mean, a lot getting done in a few words, but we're not here to talk about Rachel. We're here to talk about you. So, awesome.
Oh, no.
So Changelings and the Fae world, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So it's a kind of almost a portal fantasy.
Okay. So, what is your unique twist on the Fae?
I don't know that I have a terribly unique twist. They have, well, I guess there's 12 families, and they kind of all jostle with one another for power and who's going to be on top. And the thing is, like, my main character, she's a changeling. She's actually a fae. Who has been placed in the human world, and that actually gives her special powers where she can kind of control things between worlds, like the doorways between worlds. She can open and close those, and also her magic can't be canceled out by anybody else, so whatever she does, like, somebody else can't undo it. And they actually have made changelings illegal, so not only does she find out that she's adopted and she's got magical powers, everybody is out trying to kill her because that's their solution to having a changeling being created, because that upsets the power balance between the families.
Right.
So that's kind of like my take on it, I guess.
Neat. Tell us a little bit more about your character.
So my main character, it's told from first-person point of view, and although I said it's kind of like a portal fantasy, I mean, it starts out more urban fantasy where they don't go into the Fae world that often. It's just more like the magical stuff is being brought into the city. And my main character, Nicole, she is very, 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 very type A, very practical, and having this kind of thing upset her life, she's like, I just want to get my work done. I'm working toward this promotion. I don't know what's going on. So this kind of forces her. Right. I mean, she thinks it's cool, but it's not really where she wanted to go with her life, or it wasn't part of her plan. So this kind of forces her to re-examine where she's going and what she wants out of life.
Okay, so expand for me into the setting. So type A is a thing that makes me think of the United States, and where is this located? Is it in a particular location?
It's yeah, it's actually set in Portland.
Portland.
So that's the city. Yeah, that's the city that I've chosen. I think it's a great city, and I visited like a couple times and ran around taking pictures of everything and like getting maps and trying to figure out like what's going on where. I
Okay, so this
know
is for
that
your research process?
some authors don't. Yeah. So I made a point to visit a couple of times and kind of take notes. And
Cool.
also I have friends there, so.
Uh-huh. So now you've got me intrigued. So let's I'm going to ask you about how you feel your trips to Portland changed the way your story came out.
I think that so I started writing it before I had actually been to Portland, and I just kind of glommed onto Portland because I have friends that live there, and I know like a little bit about its reputation for being like, a little bit like hipster, kind of weird. So I liked that a lot, and I actually had written in some scenes where they're having like this car chase like through downtown, and then I went there and I realized that that would totally not work. It's just like there's all these stop signs and just the layout of the city, it just would not work that way. So I had to completely go back and rewrite that scene. And I also kind of got to see, yeah, like, so there's only so much sometimes that YouTube can do, because I would go and I would look up some places, and for some reason people take videos of everywhere that they go a lot of times, and so I was kind of able to get a feel for some of the places just looking at videos and pictures and like Google Maps.
Yeah.
The street view, that was awesome.
Yeah,
But you don't really get a feel for, yeah, I mean, you can't see what a place looks like at certain times of day using Street View. You only get one time of day. You don't know what time of day it is. You don't know what it looks like the rest of the time, like what kind of people are there, what are they doing, what does it smell like, and what does it sound like. So actually going there and kind of seeing what it was like, and like what the nightlife was like, what it was like in the middle of the day, during the week even, or during the weekend, that was different. So getting to see that kind of thing really influenced my revision process. So I just had to go back and kind of tweak things.
So were you doing these revisions when you were not even done yet, or were you also doing them after the fact?
No, I was doing them after the fact, mostly, just because I hadn't had the chance to go and visit until after I had finished writing the rough draft of the book. So before I did my revisions, I was mostly just relying on Google Maps Street View, videos, photos that other people had taken, certain parks and everything. But you can't really kind of tell the layout very well. But getting to go and visit was really great. Like I did that twice, and now I kind of have an idea, like, oh, like I really want to set like a fight scene in the Japanese garden sometime, like something like that. So now I have like a map of that, and so I think it was extremely helpful.
So did you ever write the fight scene in the Japanese garden?
I haven't yet, but it's coming. I'm going to, because it's just such a cool place, and I think that having that contrast of a place that's so beautiful and peaceful and organized, like, oh my God, and having a crazy fight scene in there would just be great. So
yeah, that sounds really cool, actually. Well, I think I like the way that you're talking about the step by step of your research process in terms of the location, because I agree. I've used Google what's it called? Google World, I guess, where you see
Earth.
satellite, and then also Google Street View to help me with recalling some locations that I had been previously but hadn't been in recently enough to recall the precise layout, if you know what I'm saying. So I found myself looking up, a shrine in Tokyo, for example. And that was super, super helpful. So in a place, you can use those tools to refresh your memory. And obviously, if you've never been to a place, you can actually get really far with using those things, and yet it won't tell you everything about the place. So you're either going to be creating an alternate vibe with your construction of the people and the light and that kind of stuff, or you gotta see if you can go visit. Fortunately, Portland is relatively accessible. So
it is, and I do find it interesting how, because I've read urban fantasy, and sometimes the city is really part of the story, and you can kind of feel the vibe from it, and sometimes it really doesn't add much. Like, okay, so I love the Dresden Files a lot, and that's set in Chicago. But honestly, I think it could be set in almost any other city or some kind of fictional city, and it just, because I don't think it matters that much, honestly, for that one. Yeah. But it's amazing. I'm not saying anything bad about it. I love it.
Sometimes, okay, so what am I trying to say? The importance of the setting, the location in which you set something, differs depending on the work and depending on the author, right? And sometimes
I would say so, yeah.
Or everything, right? I mean, sometimes it's like it's its own character, and at other times, not so much. So, anyway, cool, very cool. So I would like to hear a little bit about. Okay, so actually, before we move on from research, let me ask you one more question.
Yeah.
Did you do research on Fae and that kind of stuff as well?
I did. I actually went to the library and I pulled some books on fairy tales, and I actually was drawing mostly. I mean, I made up a lot of stuff. So,
that's okay.
but I did want to kind of, get a feel for what was out there and what it was all about. So I did do some research as far as what kind of fairies there were in different mythology and folklore, and what they were known for, what they did. And I didn't draw a lot on the first book, but I know that stuff is going to come in handy when I do the next books, when I can kind of draw on more of that mythology, more of those different kinds of fairies, and kind of do my own take on them, basically. So but I had a fun time reading these old fairy tales and all the folklore. I had a book of Scottish folklore, I think it was, and that one was really interesting.
Yeah, everybody's kind of got a different take on the fairy stories, and I think it's really interesting to kind of see how different people treat the details and what they do with them. Let's see. Okay, so super, because we research everything around here. No, seriously, I mean, every time I have a guest author on, I'm like, okay, so tell me about your research.
It's so fun, though. I mean, that's half the fun of writing, right? It's finding out all these weird things.
You'd never believe it, but my daughter last night was like, I really want to be good at research. And I'm like, really? Yeah, because you do research. Come to think of it, I actually do all the time.
Yeah. I mean, now it's all these weird random facts. It's good for dinner parties.
Yeah, absolutely, and it also gives you lots of story ideas, I would imagine. So, how many books do you have planned, by the way?
well, I've outlined about 5 so far, so I'm thinking maybe like 6 to 10, just depending. I'm not quite sure exactly how many I'm going to have there yet, and part of it is just going to depend on how this all plays out. So
Cool. So tell us, I want to hear a little bit about the life you've designed for your protagonist.
So I mean, a big part of the first story is her coming to terms with, what's happened in her relationship and whether or not she actually wants to work on her marriage or if she, has moved on from that. So that's like a big part of it for her. And then also, coming to terms with straddling these two worlds where she neither belongs to one nor the other, which to me, is something that I really want to explore because, with my heritage, I'm half Chinese and I'm half Scottish, and like that was always weird for me growing up, like never quite being, fully part of one culture or fully part of the other one. And you don't actually realize that sometimes when you're very little, like you don't think in those terms. And so growing up and realizing that you're actually like, you don't fully belong in either one is kind of weird. So for her, it's like a very sudden discovery that, she's not human. She's, and her parents are kind of weird because they didn't actually, tell her that she's adopted until this point. They're like, well, we kind of forgot. So she kind of has to come to terms with the fact that like her sister's not her, like, her biological sister, and like what makes a family, and what her role is between these two worlds.
Yeah. I think it's really cool that you're engaging with the question of the third culture child, as some people call it, which is that question of spot between two different cultures. And in fact, we were just talking about culture shock not too long ago.
Yeah.
So that's definitely an element, it sounds like, in book 1.
Yeah, I mean, I explore it more. Like I have a little bit of it in the novella that I have, and then I'm going to have more of it in the third book where she kind of has to engage more with her face side and kind of learn more about their culture because she doesn't actually know how to conduct herself there, and that leads her into a lot of trouble because she's just going in there and treating people like, they're human, but they're not, and they have all these, rituals and, little things that they have to do to be polite. So that's, and then everybody just expects her to know. So
yeah,
that's
kind
exactly
of what we were saying last week with politeness. Everybody just expects you to know, and if you don't know, you're not a learner, you're a bad person.
Yeah, like at one point she just walks into the Fey world in her, regular human clothes, and everybody's staring at her, and she just doesn't, like, it doesn't compute, and then until she realizes that she is not, she's like totally standing out, and she's not like, blending at all.
That's fun. So are you using now you've got me curious about the clothing styles. Tell me about the clothing styles.
Well, I mean, obviously she's wearing regular, like, mortal clothes, and then they have, like, these beautiful, like, dresses that have, that shimmer or, like, do weird things, like they move, and it's much more like, medieval fantasy kind of thing, just because I like that stuff. So she walks into the world wearing like her leather jacket, and everybody's like, "What the heck is this?"
Well, it makes me think a little bit of Emma in Once Upon a Time, because there's a similar vibe there, where she suddenly lands in amongst all these people who are doing their medieval fantasy thing, and she's like, "But my leather jacket." So that's cool. Nice. Okay, so let's see, what else have we got going on here?
Can I mention something?
Yes,
On the
please.
protocol of author. I loved what you did just a little while ago where you used a science fiction trope to describe your fantasy book by saying does not compute, which of course comes from the history of computing, but more often from science fiction about robots and computers. I love that how that was just sort of naturally part of the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us kind of do both genres, science fiction and fantasy, just because they kind of go hand in hand sometimes, where you're just exploring new worlds and yeah.
Well, I think the borderline between them is less clear than sometimes we might think.
Right. Yeah, like look at Star Wars, right? It's like
Yeah.
science fantasy.
Uh-huh. And people can, interact with that border in multiple different ways. Plus, I think that when you're looking at the intersection of what we call the real world and fantasy worlds, you're going to, by necessity, have some scientific viewpoints, if not science fictional viewpoints, coming in because of the fact that science and science fiction are part of our real world.
Mm-hmm. Right. You don't want to have a fantasy world that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
It's one of those things where you get some gimmies because it's fantasy, so you're like, well, it's magic, but you can't do that too much because after a while you lose any kind of like integrity that you had.
You can't wave the wand too often.
No, and it's got to be consistent.
So did you? What kind of magic are you working with in this scenario?
So the magic I have, like, there's different kinds of things that people tend to specialize in. So they usually have like two specializations. There's things like shoot, I'm like trying to remember what I called it now. There's things like there's like traveling where they can kind of travel short distances or long distances in a short period of time. There's like sword play, so they can actually like move quicker in a battle. There's like shape changing, where they can change the shapes and properties of different objects. There's warding, where they can actually, like ward against other fae and keep them out of certain places. Shoot, and I can't think of like some of the other ones off the top of my head. Oh, there's elemental magic, so like ice and fire. That's one. But it's all like powered by emotions, and actually like after some time they just kind of burn out on that, where they're like at one point my character, she's just like done all this stuff and she's tried so hard and she actually can't feel any emotion for a while because she's just burnt out.
That's cool. So she loses her powers, I guess, if she's being emotionally burnt out.
Yeah. So she can't actually do anything when she's emotionally burnt out like that. And sometimes that can last for a really long time, just depending on who it is and what they've done. And sometimes there's just different recovery rates.
Well, I mean, it sounds like it sounds like an interesting way to get psychology in, among other things.
Like, don't do too much, you'll get burnt out.
Yeah, it's interesting because emotions are something that get burnt out.
If you feel too intensely about something for a long time, then you kind of just start to not be able to feel anything about it.
Yeah. Do you keep what they sometimes call a story Bible?
I do. I have a few of them. I have ones for the different families, like who's in the family, what are they all about, where do they live in the Fae lands, and what's their relation to the other families, and also like what their crest is, because they all have a crest. I also have ones like talking about like the magic, like what kind of things they can do with it, because I want to stay fairly consistent.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I have ones like that, and then also just about the world in general. So I keep a few of these actually, and I'm terribly organized, which I need to be better about that. But like they usually just have the name of like, oh, like Changeling, and then whatever kind of file it is after that. I should put it in a folder.
No, so this is virtual though. It's not in like notebooks or something.
No, I do it all in Word. I'm not very good handwriting, so I want to keep it legible because I don't want to go back and be like, what was I trying to say? I have no idea what that says. So yeah, I keep it all in Word.
Yeah, it's really problematic when you write something down and then you're like, I don't even know.
Yeah, no, when I'm going really fast and taking notes, like if I'm at a con or something, sometimes it's not good.
I have the biggest problem when I'm woken up in the middle of the night and I need to write something down and I write it.
You can't even see it. It's all dark.
Cool. Awesome. I'm gonna ask
Very
other
true.
people if they have questions.
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, so my wife and I recently, it's in Spokane, at Worldcon, we got to hear Andrea give reading of some material that isn't out yet. I wanted to ask about how, if you wanted to talk about that at all, or and maybe how your work on Changeling has influenced that work and where you think that's going.
Okay, so the one that I read at Worldcon is definitely more of my typical writing, where it's very dark and lush and just has a lot of thematic elements going on. So with that one, I'm actually in the process of splitting it into 2 books, which is what my agent asked me to do. So I'm doing that, and then once I finish that, it's going to go out in submission. So that's where I'm at with that, and I'm kind of been trying to balance the two I have this book that I really want to get out in submission, and then I have my series that I need to get my next book out. But I think as far as influencing one another, one of the things that I wanted to do by writing the Changeling Wars series is to kind of have like a breather between the very kind of grim, dark stuff that I usually write. So I can write something that's very intense and bloody and just horrible, and then write something that's kind of like fluffier and funnier and, has this quirky character that can't quite get her shit together. So I kind of wanted to do that, so I'm not like just dwelling on all this kind of very intense stuff all the time. Not that the Changeling Wars series never gets intense. It's just that it's got a very different tone. Like there's more banter and things going on than in my darker stuff, because my darker stuff, yeah, there's some banter, but it's very like politically based kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at with both of those, and I'm thinking, right now I'm kind of doing the whole, I think I put on Facebook, I'm looking for another job. So I think once I get another job that's like, a little less intense than what I'm working on right now, then I'll have more time to kind of devote to both of those series, because my plan right now is finish splitting that dark fantasy into 2 books, get it out on sub, and while it's out on sub, then I can revise my next book for my Changeling Wars series and get that out, because it is finished. I just need to go back and revise it.
Very cool. So now I want to hear a little bit more about what this world is that you're working in for the work in progress.
The work in progress, it has a working title of Windrider, and I talked to some people, and they said you should probably change that. So that's just the working title right now. I'm terrible at titles, but
you know what?
Is definitely
that's okay, because everybody changes the title, right?
Yeah, right? That way people can change it and I won't be attached to it. I don't know. But it is a dark fantasy, and it's set in it kind of goes between these two countries that are the last two countries on this continent to stand against the Iseth, which are these winged creatures that oppress and enslave humans. And they've kind of conquered the rest of the continent, and they're focusing on these two countries. And it follows these 4 children who are growing up and, you know, trying to figure out what they should do to stop their countries from falling to these creatures. And it's kind of like set in a Renaissance, like European kind of setting, although I do have other countries in there, like there's the countries down to the south, and one of the main characters is, you know, half and half ethnicity. I guess like I like to do that kind of stuff. So like, and he has his own thing with that. But it's got dragons. Although not maybe in the way you might expect. I was talking to some people and they said you might not want to market it to dragon people because they're not treated very nicely here. So I don't want to hurt people's feelings.
Sounds intriguing. I suppose that's too much of a spoiler for you to tell us more about it?
Well, I mean, basically, I've described it to people as Breaking Bad meets the other Boleyn girl with dragons, because my main character, my narrator, a big conflict, I mean, the main conflict for her is deciding how far she's going to go to save her country and her people and the people that she cares about. And in order to do that, she has to basically oppress and enslave these dragons in order to have, you know, something that can fight against these other winged creatures. So, you know, a big theme of my book is, you know, tribalism, basically. Like, you know, you have your group of people that you love, and, you know, everybody else you just don't care as much about. So you're kind of willing to do, like, bad things to other people because you want to save the people that you care about. So that's kind of like a running thing in my book, and that's where the dragons come in.
Interesting. I'm acting like I don't know anything about this. I actually know some things about this.
I know.
I'm trying to sort of play my cards really subtly and just kind of poke you in various ways. So, yeah, awesome. So how is the work going on splitting the 2 books? Just wondering.
Well, I split them into 2 books, and I'm currently going back and rewriting and revising things and moving things around, because I think a big thing there is if I'm splitting into 2 books, I need each book to work on its own as like a single arc, and to have that kind of you know, feeling like of resolution. While still leaving, okay, you know, there's a second book coming. So that's been a big part of the work, and also kind of expanding some things, because one of the things my agent said was that it feels a little bit too rushed, and I think you can explore these other things, to which I'm like, yes!
Well, exactly.
So that was an exciting part.
Yeah.
More words. So that's what I've been working on right now. I have it split, and I'm just kind of moving things around. I'm getting close to the end, so
that's
getting
cool.
there.
Well, I mean, so like, I mean, I think it's interesting actually to address this question of when you take something that's long and looks like this, and you want to chop it in half and then create it into 2 things as though it was like cells undergoing mitosis or something.
That's what it feels like, yeah.
And we will split off, but we also have to make sure that the cell membrane is coming back.
Right. It has to be a complete thing on its own.
But I also think you've picked up on something really important also, with the idea that when you have more space, you know, you can, when you're not feeling rushed, you can actually go deeper into some of the things that really make the book meatier. And so
I hope so. I mean, that's like my intent. So
there's that balance, though. I mean, because people these days talk a lot about fast pace and how fast pace is so important, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
At the same time,
yeah, Yeah, I think particularly it was the ending that she said felt rushed because part of it was I was looking at my word count and I was getting closer to the end and I'm like, oh God, I have to make all these things happen. But when you do that, sometimes you don't get to explore the emotional implications or how that affects everybody else. It's just things happening. And
Yeah.
that's when I think it starts to feel rushed rather than fast-paced.
Right, right. I tend to agree about emotional implications being important.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, having somebody react to whatever it is that you're putting on their plate, like that's how your reader connects to your character. So if you don't have that, then yeah, I mean, it's harder for you to care.
Yep. Yeah. I think it's also, what, sorry?
I just had a quick question. How many words was the first draft before you split it?
It was, I think it was about 130,000 words, which isn't terribly long, but I also kind of glossed over some things that now I'm getting to go into. Like in the first version, they never went to the ISIS lands. You never get to see how they live or what that's all about. So in this version, I'm actually having them go there, and then they can kind of see what their culture is all about and why they have this conflict with one another where they just can't seem to come to any kind of agreement, where they have to fight one another. So that to me was a big deal, and also exploring the internal political implications of what's going on, because when you have, you know, these two countries that are on the brink of invasion and or they are, you know, through the course of the book being invaded, you know, people tend to get, you know, there's like all this stuff going on there where people tend to butt heads over that or what they should do or how they should deal with that, especially when it's like life and death. And then there are refugees from the other countries that they're trying to deal with. So getting to go into all that, I think it's going to make it a lot richer. Instead of just a surface view of this is how it's affecting these main characters without kind of seeing how it all interweaves.
Because, I mean, it's part of a much bigger picture, right? I mean, yeah, yeah.
Well, certainly if you flesh out the antagonists, it makes the conflict more realistic.
Yeah. So I'm hoping like to end up with two like 90 to 100K books is where it looks like it's going.
Yeah. Well, I've always found the question of book length rather funny, you know.
Yeah.
Like, you know, they say, well, it's got to be such and such a length and whatever, and you know, you hear that and you go, oh, come on, and you kind of sit back and you go, well, you know, it's not really going to be that long because, like, you know, life isn't that simple and whatever, and then, you know, you write it and you split it and you do whatever and you make it feel like it's right. And hey, wait a second, it kind of falls in that window. I don't know what it is exactly. I think it might be something about like expected properties of the art form or something like that.
Yeah, it's interesting, the whole word count question. I mean, yeah, there's some things that's like, well, you know, unless you're George R. R. Martin, that is not an okay word count. But it's funny how, you know, readers don't actually tend to notice unless you've got like a door stopper. It's just they don't know how long these things are.
Well, I mean, also I think it's also interesting. Like if you look at like J.K. Rowling's work, you can tell that her first 3 books were better edited than the last 4. like it was like, oh wait, people are just lapping this up. Give us all the things.
I see that a lot in series actually, where, you know, you get further in and then it's become popular and then everybody just wants to devour as much as they can.
So popularity is the enemy of editing.
I think also sometimes authors, like, at a certain point don't want to be edited, and if they're big enough, they can get away with it.
Well, to me too, I partially feel like, especially if it's a debut author, you know, you come out with your one book and you have spent so much time on it, like going through beta readers, doing revisions, doing whatever your agent says that you should do, going through an editor, and then you get this really short timeline to be like, okay, well now you have to do book number 2. I think it's almost inevitable that it's going to feel less edited than whatever you came out with first, just because for a debut author, I mean, I think they tend to spend a lot more time on that first book.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like my generous, just because I feel like, oh God, I hope that doesn't happen to me. I want people to understand.
Well, I totally hear you on that, though. I mean, it makes perfect sense. Because you spend a ton of time trying to get the book into a place where people will actually find it saleable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
That is a lot of revision, and it's a lot of editing.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's an interesting question. And the other question that always comes to mind when I think of people like J.K. Rowling is like, well, how much is self-indulgence when you're just kind of digging into world stuff, and how much of it is important to the story?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that borderline for different people can fall in different places.
Right. Because some people, they just want to know everything that they can get their hands on. They want like the companion, encyclopedia of like all the little world things. Like it just kind of depends, I think, partially on what kind of reader you are too.
Yeah. I love the idea of a companion encyclopedia.
Well, they do. I mean, oh my God! Like when I was younger, I totally bought that for the Pern series. Like I was like, I have to know everything. I want to know what the recipe is for claw. Like how do they make that? Like I had to know everything about it. So I bought everything that I could on that series.
Yeah. Interesting.
I
oh my God! Is my nerd showing?
We're all nerds here.
The Tolkien's posthumous output with the 12 volumes of Lost Tales and the Silmarillion and all that is, exceeds the word count of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
it's a lot of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a couple out there for the Wheel of Time too. I remember seeing on bookshelves. So anything that's like big enough and like popular enough will get additional materials.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just hold on to your files, is that what you're saying here? Hold on to all your world building files.
Yeah.
All those partial drafts that you put down.
Like, oh, well, this is useless. It doesn't advance the story.
But I could explore it later.
Right. I could put it in the encyclopedia.
Awesome. That's fantastic.
Bibles that you have. If you're going to keep a Bible for the story, then, you're all set. Good beginning to make your encyclopedia for your world and your series.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's starting that process.
Yeah, you can cross your fingers that, that gets used someday because your series is so popular.
Right. We're all going to be that popular, you guys.
Dream big, right? Dream big.
There's no reason not to.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we're coming up to the end of our time, so I'm gonna wrap up here. Andrea, thank you so much for coming and talking to us about your work.
Thank you so much for having me on. That was super fun.
Yeah. Well, I really enjoyed having you, and then I'm glad that even though your video cut out a few times, that your audio was solid the whole way through. Yay.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
Yep. And we managed to get Brian and Cliff in, and Chase back, and Morgan's here, and sounds great. So next week, I don't even know what's going on. I think we're meeting on Wednesday again, and I had a feeling I knew what the topic was, but now I don't. So it's okay. I will be on Twitter to let you guys know what the topic was. I believe our guest for next month, we have at least one. I know that Charlie Jane Anders is talking to me about coming and talking about her book, and somebody else as well. So I will be in touch about all of those great things. And thank you so much, Andrea, and good luck with all of the different things you're working on right now.
Thank you.
All right.
We'll have to talk about your stuff later.